During a lengthy 5-year period, the whole of Britain would be brought down to its knees in extreme terror. But how did a weak, timid child turn into a monster, becoming one of Britain's most evil? Keep watching as I investigate Peter Sutcliffe, aka the Yorkshire Ripper. Peter Sutcliffe was born prematurely on the 2nd of June 1946 to parents John and Kathleen Sutcliffe. As a newborn, he had to spend 2 weeks in hospital with his mother before they would let them both home to his working-class Catholic family in Bingley, West Yorkshire. As a child, he was bullied relentlessly at St. Joseph's Catholic Primary School for his small stature and skinny legs. This made it difficult for him to socialise with other children, and he would often turn to his mother for comfort, where he was described as an extra clingy mother's boy. In turn, Sutcliffe's mother would heap a buttload of attention on her son, and he would see her as one of the few women in his life as being perfect. However, being brought up as a Catholic, he was taught that women should always be ladylike but respected. But his respect and vision of perfection in his mother didn't last long. His father was an alcoholic womanizer, and he was physically aggressive towards Sutcliffe's mother and would often accuse her of being a cheater. It all came to a head in the 1970s when his father planned to expose Sutcliffe's mother by posing as one of her extramarital lovers. He lured her to a hotel and took Sutcliffe plus 2 of his siblings to witness the betrayal of their mother. Witnessing his mother's downfall from the pedestal of perfection, seeing her as a liar, cheat, and not to be respected, this is said to have been the catalyst that would begin Sutcliffe's lifelong hatred and rage on females. As a teenager in secondary school, Sutcliffe would begin to play truant from school, roaming the streets to indulge in his voyeuristic obsession, spying on prostitutes and their customers. He eventually left school at age 15 and had a number of jobs, including a role as a gravedigger at the cemetery in Bingley. Now, knowing what we know about Sutcliffe at this point, gruesomely enough, he was in his element with this role. He would volunteer for extra time in the mortuary, put his hand up for extra cash washing down the bodies, and would even jump into graves. In the pub, he would talk to his friends all the time about the dead bodies. At 20 years old, he began dating Sonia Smirza, who he would go on to marry in 1974 when he obtained his HGV lorry license. He would then start visiting the red light district. However, one experience with a prostitute would leave Sutcliffe red-faced. She took £5 from him, but ended up refusing to refund him when they didn't have intimate relations. She ended up telling everyone in the pub, humiliating Sutcliffe in the process. A year later, Sutcliffe would turn deadly. Between 1975 to 1980, Sutcliffe would begin his reign of terror that brought the whole of Britain to its knees as he embarked on a murder spree, killing 13 women and attempting to murder 7 more. October 1975, the birth of the Yorkshire Ripper began as he killed his first victim, mother of 4, Wilma McCann in Leeds. As her children slept inside their family home, 150 yards away, Sutcliffe hit her over the head with a hammer and then proceeded to stab her 15 times in the neck and stomach. With a taste for blood, it wasn't long until Sutcliffe would strike again. In January 1976, Sutcliffe picked up Emily Jackson from the red light district in Leeds, dragged her to an isolated area, stomped on her leg so hard that he left a boot print, and stabbed her in excess of 45 times with a screwdriver. Over a year later, in February 1977, Sutcliffe would strike again in Leeds on another prostitute, mother of 3, Irene Richardson. He hit her 3 times over the head with a hammer and then stabbed her in the neck and stomach. Her bloodied body was later found behind the sports pavilion in Roundhay Park. After leaving the clue of his boot print on Emily Jackson, he left another clue at the crime scene of Irene Richardson. They were tire prints near her lifeless body. His appetite for extreme violence and murder began to ramp up, and a couple of months later, in April 1977, 32-year-old Patricia Atkinson would become Sutcliffe's fourth victim, and in doing so, he would graduate to becoming a full-blown, dangerous serial killer. After drinking at the Carlisle pub, Patricia Atkinson accepted Sutcliffe's offer to take her home in his car, a decision that would lead to fatal consequences. Walking through her front door, Sutcliffe brutally attacked her with a hammer, leaving in his wake a third clue at the murder scene, another boot print on a blood-stained sheet. It was not until Sutcliffe's fifth victim, 16-year-old shop assistant Jane MacDonald, that the newspapers started to take more notice of the women that were being viciously murdered. With the previous four victims, they were all thought to be sex workers. However, Jane MacDonald was not. In the evening of June 1977, Jane was on her way home from a night out when Sutcliffe pounced on her and killed her. Her body was found by two children at a playground in Reginald Street, Chapeltown in Leeds. Upon reporting on this grisly murder, due to the gruesome mutilation the victims would endure, the press would give birth to Sutcliffe's alternative name, that of the Yorkshire Ripper. Before long, Sutcliffe would return back to terrorising prostitutes, and in October 1977, he picked up mother of two, Jean Jordan, from Manchester's red light district. After slashing and killing her, the body was found over a week later by Coronation Street star Bruce Jones. Another clue would be left at the scene that would help detectives close in around Sutcliffe. Jean Jordan's bag was found in the area where she was dumped, and there was a new £5 note inside. Using the serial number on the note, police were able to trace it back to the Yorkshire Truck Haulage Company where Sutcliffe worked at. Detectives promptly pulled Sutcliffe in for questioning twice, but after providing an alibi, they unleashed him back into the world, free to kill again and again and again. After being able to outsmart the detectives and get away with it, an emboldened Sutcliffe promptly went back to his killing spree, and in January 1978, he bludgeoned 21-year-old Yvonne Pearson in Bradford. He stuffed horsehair in her mouth and hid her body under an old sofa, which laid there for 2 months until her rotting corpse was found. That same month, Sutcliffe would drive to the railway arches behind Garrard's timber yard in Huddersfield's red light district, where he killed 18-year-old Helen Ritker. After a brief break, Sutcliffe would emerge in Manchester to strike again in May 1978, hitting 41-year-old mother of 7 Vera Millwood over the head and stabbing her several times, callously taking another life of an innocent woman. Her body would later be found at Manchester Royal Infirmary Hospital. At this stage, the police would interview Sutcliffe again after his car was spotted 7 times in the red light districts of both Leeds and Bradford. Evading the police yet again, he explained that he was simply on his way to work, and detectives ended up letting the Yorkshire Ripper slip through their fingers yet again. Perhaps it was this later encounter with the police that deterred Sutcliffe for this long, but after being inactive for a year, in May 1979, Sutcliffe would make his way to Halifax, West Yorkshire, and go back to his Ripper ways, killing 19-year-old bank worker Josephine Whitaker. Her body was found in Savile Park. In July 1979, Sutcliffe was interviewed by the police for a 5th time. Detective Constable Andrew Laptew started to put all the clues together and became extremely suspicious due to Sutcliffe resembling the description given by one of the surviving victims of the Yorkshire Ripper. In addition, the shoe prints left at 2 of the murder scenes fitted the shoe size of Sutcliffe. Overall, the detective constable got the vibe of Sutcliffe being sinister and something just not quite right about the man. After submitting the report regarding his suspicions, they were swiftly waved away by his superiors, and Sutcliffe yet again got away with murder. After this, Sutcliffe would then go back to Bradford and attack 20-year-old Bradford student Barbara Leach in September 1979. He hit her over the head and stabbed her 8 times just moments away from her home in Ashgrove, Bradford. After being interviewed several more times by the police and slipping through their fingers time and time again, less than a year later, 47-year-old civil servant Marguerite Walls would become the next victim in August 1980. Her body would be dumped in a garden in New Street, Farsley. It was November 1980 in Leeds. Sutcliffe's last victim, 20-year-old Jacqueline Hill, was in Headingley departing a bus when she caught the eye of Sutcliffe, who began stalking her. After choosing his moment carefully, he began to attack her. In Sutcliffe's confession, he explained the following. As she drew level with an opening on the right-hand side, I took my hammer out of my pocket and struck her a blow on the head. She fell down. She was making a noise. By this time, I was again in a world of my own, out of touch with reality. I dragged her, I cannot remember whether by the feet or the hands, into the entrance to the spare land. By now, Miss Hill was moving about, and I think I hit her once again, or maybe twice, on the head. Then I dragged her further onto the spare line, out of sight of the road. I pulled Miss Hill's clothes off, most of them. I had a screwdriver on me. I think it had a yellow handle and a bent blade. I stabbed her in her lungs. Her eyes were wide open, and she seemed to be looking at me with an accusing stare. This shook me up a bit. I jabbed the screwdriver into her eye, but they stayed open, and I felt worse than ever. I left her lying on her back with her feet towards the entrance. I think she was dead when I left. On the 2nd of January 1981, Sutcliffe was stalking in Sheffield's red light district area when he caught the attention of 2 police officers, Sergeant Bob Ring and PC Robert Hydes. After a quick check, they found that Sutcliffe's car had false number plates. When they approached the vehicle, Sutcliffe said that he had to quickly go pee. The officers allowed him to do so, however, afterwards they arrested him and took him to Dewsbury Police Station for further questioning. Following day, the diligent sergeant returned to where they arrested Sutcliffe and began a search where he subsequently found a knife, hammer and rope that Sutcliffe hid when he went for a pee. Furthermore, Sutcliffe had hidden a second knife at the police station toilets, which were located soon after. After 2 days of interrogation, Sutcliffe finally admitted that he was the Yorkshire Ripper and claimed to have heard voices from God whilst working as a gravedigger, ordering him to kill prostitutes. After this confession, he was charged with 13 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. The trial of Peter Sutcliffe started on 29th of April 1981 at the Old Bailey, lasting 2 weeks. He pleaded not guilty to the 13 counts of murder, however pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Due to his plea of insanity, rather than determining his guilt or innocence, the jury instead had to decide whether he was insane or fully in control of all his mental faculties. Once all the evidence was presented at the trial, the jury took 6 hours to deliberate before returning with a majority verdict of 10-2. The jury, by majority, found Sutcliffe to be sane whilst committing each offence he was charged with. The judge, Mr. Justice Borum, sentenced him to life for each of the 13 murders and 7 attempted murders. In sentencing Sutcliffe, he remarked, "I have no doubt that you are a very dangerous man indeed. I express my hope that when I have said life imprisonment, it will precisely mean that." The judge also remarked on the arresting officer, Sergeant Robert Ring and PC Robert Hydes, saying they must be very grateful, and the public in general, that these basic police tasks which they performed were carried out assiduously and with such attention to duty. After sentencing, Sutcliffe began his jail term at HM Prison Parkhurst on 22nd of May 1981. Now, even though he was found sane at the trial, during his imprisonment he was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic, and in March 1984 he was transferred and detained at Broadmoor Hospital and would stay there for over 30 years. In December 2015, Sutcliffe was deemed as no longer mentally ill, and in August 2016 he was transferred from Broadmoor to HM Prison Frankland in Durham and stayed there for the remainder of his life. On the 13th of November 2020, aged 74, Sutcliffe contracted COVID-19 and was admitted to University Hospital of North Durham. However, with his range of health issues ranging from a suspected heart attack to obesity and diabetes, Peter Sutcliffe, aka the Yorkshire Ripper, would take his last breath. He may have started out as a loner mummy's boy. However, Peter Sutcliffe, aka the Yorkshire Ripper, would end up becoming one of Britain's most evil. If you liked this and want more, then make sure you subscribe to join our Alter Nerd tribe. Like, share, comment, all of that good stuff. And until the next time, you guys, laters.